The number one cause of window and door failure is improper installation. That means you can spend thousands on top of the line windows and doors, but if the install is crappy, they're not going to last. Most of the time, that means a problem with air and water sealing. Air and water sealing play a huge role in ensuring that your windows and doors function effectively and efficiently. So today I'm going to break down how to properly air and water seal your windows with the help of this week's sponsor, GE. GE offers a wide variety of air and water sealants for all the DIY projects around your home to make sure that your home is sealed for good. Installing your own windows and doors is something that you can do on your own if you know how to properly do it. Now let's talk about replacement versus new construction windows. Most homeowners aren't building their homes from scratch. They have purchased a home and you're probably going to be updating the windows. Now even though that's the case, I usually like to use what are considered new construction windows. Now the main difference when you're shopping is that new construction usually have a nailing flange around the outside of the window, while windows labeled replacements typically don't. Installing a replacement window is easier because you usually don't have to remove interior and exterior trim and the original jambs. However, I personally think that this leads to more potential issues with air and water sealing. I prefer to use a nailing flange because it provides an added barrier to air and water. It's more work on the install, but I think it's worth it. Step 1 is to prep the rough opening. Now, the rough opening is the giant hole in the side of your house that you're installing the window in. The rough opening should be slightly larger than the window that you're installing. In most cases, that's ½ inch to 1 inch larger. The suggested rough opening for your windows is typically listed on a sticker or info pack included with your new windows. The next thing you need to do is make sure the bottom of the rough opening, called the sill, is angled slightly towards the exterior of your home. That means if any water does get behind the window, it can work its way out. Next, it's time to water seal the sill. Now, I prefer to use a flashing tape to do this. A flashing tape is a rubberized waterproof tape that you apply to the rough opening sill that goes all the way across the bottom and slightly up the sides. Now in the corners, you either want to use a plastic window corner flashing, or I prefer to use a stretchable tape to create my own flashing corners. Make sure to roll the tape if the tape manufacturer calls for it. From there, the next step is dry fitting the windows. And a critical component is adding a few shims on the bottom sill, which will be crucial for air sealing later on. But the gist is you just want to make sure that your rough opening is large enough, you get the window in place and make sure that everything looks good and that you have a small even gap on the inside of the window install so that you can use that space for air sealing later on. And once that's done, then you can move on to the next step, which is the final install. Now, when you think about proper installation in air and water sealing, you can think about it in layers. And the easiest way for me to illustrate this for you is to animate it. Now, the reason why I always prefer to use a window with a nailing flange is because the first layer is to seal directly around the window behind the nailing flange. And to do that, you want to use a premium 100% silicone product like GE Sealants Window and Door Supreme Silicone. You want to add a continuous bead around the top and both sides of the window. I prefer not to seal on the underside of the windows, but you can do the bottom of the window as well, as long as you leave several good sized gaps in your sealant. And that's because you want to allow for water to get out. In the event that water does somehow get back there, it has a place to escape. And the reason why you want to use silicone for your window and door projects is because it's 100% waterproof and retains permanent flexibility, which means it will not freeze and will stay flexible when it's either hot or cold. Once you've plumbed and leveled the window and nailed it in place, the next layer of air and water sealing is to flash around the window. Now again, I like to use flashing tape for this. The order in which you do it is important. You do the sides first and then the top, making sure that you go up high enough on the sides so that you can overlap with the top head flashing. You'll also want to probably add a Z flashing above the window, which is typically a piece of metal so that the water can kick out over the window and run down its face. Again, at the bottom of the window, I don't do anything because I still want the water to be able to get out. And because I flashed the sill first, the water can still run out over that flashing. Now, I know I'm going to get some questions about if I already have siding that goes all the way up to the window. As I mentioned, it can get a little messy when installing windows with a nailing flange, but I feel like it's the best weather-tight way to do it. If I was dealing with stucco or lap siding, for example, I would probably cut back a ways away from the window, replace the window, and then put in a new trim around it. I prefer to silicone the window directly to the substrate instead of on top of a house wrap, and I find that having a solid seal between the window and the substrate of the house is the most effective, and I haven't had any issues with it. Then I use the flashing tape as that second layer of protection. After the second layer, your windows should be considered weather tight, but the third layer of added protection starts with the trim. Exterior trim or casing is different depending on just about every home you look at, but the principles of air and water sealing are the same. Once you have your trim installed, you want to make sure that you seal around it so that you don't have water, bugs, and air getting in there and causing problems. Now, there are two different GE products that I recommend for this. Number one, if you can, I prefer to use 100% silicone that is somewhat color matched to the window and trim that you're installing. In this case, these windows are almond. The trim is also kind of an almond thing, so I'm using the almond color Supreme silicone between the window itself and the trim. Unfortunately, 100% silicone is not paintable. So if a manufacturer claims that they have 100% silicone that's paintable, they're lying to you. So I carefully tape off the areas so that way I don't have any excess that gets on anything that I can't paint later. Alternatively, and what I prefer to use anywhere where two colors are going to meet, like here where the house meets the trim, I prefer to use a GE product called siliconized acrylic, or another one of their products called Paintable Silicone Supreme. They have a lot of the same beneficial properties of 100% silicone, including being waterproof and flexible, as well as being UV resistant. However, they are paintable, which is obviously a very valuable benefit given that no two houses are really the same. So the third and final layer of air and water sealing on the exterior of the house is to make sure that you seal from the window to the trim and then from the trim to the house itself. At the bottom of the window, once again, I like to leave a couple little holes on the underside of the trim so that should any water get in there, I don't know how it will, but if it does, it has a way to get out. Water that is trapped is the perfect breeding ground for mold and rot, so you don't want water trapped anywhere. So from an exterior perspective, that's about all that you can do for air and water sealing. Now we can shift over and look at the interior. Now the interior is a much simpler process and is largely just focused on air sealing and eliminating drafts. And the way to do that is to utilize GE's insulating foam specifically formulated for windows and doors. It's a low pressure expanding foam that you install into that little gap we talked about earlier in the video, and it makes sure that air and insects can't penetrate around your window. Simply spray it into all the gaps around the windows, make sure to get it all the way around, let it cure, and then cut off any excess with the razor blade. Then you can build out your jamb extensions or just install your trim however you normally would, and you've got yourself a finished weather-tight window installation. All that's left to do is come back through and prep for paint by sealing all your edges with GE's Painter's Quick Dry Sealant Paint, and you're good to go. I want to say a quick thank you to GE for making this video possible, and I also want to encourage you guys to check out some of my favorite GE products on my Amazon storefront at the link in the description down below. I hope this video showed you that installing your own windows is something you can do on your own, and it's something you can do well at the same time. And using GE sealants means that your windows and doors will be sealed for good. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.